I used to think when I did my baskets, like one example was I needed an extra spoke, which was the framework of a basket. And I just didn't want to go down in the cellar and get it. So I took a spoke I was using, but was much too long. And I just twisted around and stuck it where I needed it. And the more I wove, the more I thought, oh, this is a whole new shape. This is a whole new idea. So I realized that these little quirks I have of shortcuts and things that I think are silly are part of my creative process, that I'm not afraid to try something or do something.
Hello and welcome to the New York Guild of Handweavers Member Spotlight. My name is Katie Clements and I'm the membership chair of the Guild. With almost 200 members, the New York Guild of Handweavers provides inspiration, information, and mutual support to anyone interested in weaving, tapestry, spinning, or fiber arts through speakers, workshops, as well as our lending library. Go to nyhandweavers.org for more information. Today, we will talk with New York Guild member Elisa Kessler Caporale. Elisa is a professional basket maker. Though she weaves traditional baskets, she is known for the one-of-a-kind contemporary baskets, which often incorporate found objects, paper, pottery, and bark. Elisa has woven with cardboard cracker boxes and is working on a series of reed and copper tubing work. Recently, she's begun to incorporate wearable knotless netting jewelry pieces in her work. Elisa has been making baskets for 38 years. She also demonstrates through the tri-state area and teaches locally at county TeenArts Programs, senior centers, elementary after-school programs, and the Newark Museum. She works as a guest artist at the Discover Charter School in Newark, New Jersey, which also incorporates a program for children with disabilities. Elisa has a BA in art history from Western College for Women in Oxford, Ohio, and was a design assistant for Harcourt Brace Jovanovich Publishers after graduation. In 1998, she received a certificate in gerontology from Union County College in Cranford, New Jersey. She was volunteer at the Visitors Center at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City for several years and worked on the children's programs for this centennial year. Welcome, Elisa.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Great to have you here, and I'm looking forward to talking about all your work because you provided some great pictures. And
Right.
looking forward, and you have a great history, which I got to know more about.
Well, one of the things I mentioned, I grew up in New York City, so I was very close to the Metropolitan Museum. So I always was surrounded by art. My mother did watercolors in the summer, and my dad, though he was a doctor, he was always picking things up off the streets of New York, these crazy parts of old stoves and stuff. So I think, and he'd spray them gold and make a Madonna and child. So I think, all my life, I was looking at things and observing. But I did some weaving. I learned to weave in 3rd grade on a Structo loom. And later at camp, I did some inkle loom. But I never really stuck to any one thing. And then when we were on vacation in Maine, I made a basket by the lake, which was very nice. And then 2 years later, I made another one. And I didn't get bored. I could finish something in a couple days. And I began to take classes, and then some of my friends wanted to learn how to make simple baskets, and I taught them. Then I started to do scouts and after school programs, and then I had some money, so I started to take more advanced classes, and I met people who belonged to basket guilds, which I didn't even know existed. And by that time, I have 2 children, and I was able to leave them with my husband. They weren't babies. And I could go off for a whole day and take a class. And then I graduated to conferences. And then I really began to see what was going on and started to show my work, first with just taking pictures and then slides. And then just when I got my slides done, it was digital and had to learn that. And eventually, when I was living in New Jersey, I was close to Newark, and I applied for an artist in residence in, I think, 1998, and was accepted. And that was wonderful. I had 4 weeks. I went to the museum every day, even though some of the other artists in residence only showed up once in a while. And what I discovered is, even working every day, I couldn't make all the things I wanted to make. But when I was making my own, when I was taking classes, I came home and I continued to make baskets, and then discovered I was making somebody else's basket. So I just started experimenting by drilling into wood and old pine branches that were beautifully sculptured, and building a framework and weaving on that. And later I used copper tubing, which is flexible, used for plumbing. And I started weaving on copper tubing and just using different things that were representative of me. I can't do anything over and over again. It's just too boring. I can use the same materials, but I have to use them in a different way.
I'm curious more about the artist in residence. That's amazing.
Well, Newark Museum used to have a wonderful program. I think maybe now they've reenacted it or something, but they had a weaving studio, jewelry studio, and another studio space. And they used to have classes, and they used to have Saturday morning programs for youth and adults. And so each one of us, for the month of January, when they didn't have classes, we each had our own studio, and you could just go in and spread your stuff all around. And people who were visiting the museum were allowed to come in. That was part of it. We were required to teach 2 classes, I think a student class and an adult class. And I don't believe I got paid, but just the chance of being there and working on my baskets all the time, and was really wonderful. And as I said, it was interesting. I always thought I could accomplish more if I just didn't have to cook and clean and watch the children, but it still takes a long time. And it was a great experience.
So had you taught any classes before your artist in residence?
Yes, I had taught some basket classes and some fabric boxes, and probably the coiling, which we did a basket. It was called a memory basket, and you did coiled baskets, but with fabric from either old shirts of yours or old shirts of your relatives. So I tried to make it into a more interesting basket than just a coiled basket, to have a purpose behind it.
What do you like about teaching?
Oh, I love teaching. I think I'm the youngest of 4, and I think I never had a voice. So I think I like it because I can be a little bossy, but I always had trouble in school. I was always creative, but I was called careless, and I was told I should concentrate more. So when I demonstrate my baskets, people say, oh, I don't know if I have the patience for that. And I think, well, anybody can do it, but I guess they can't. I always assume anything that's easy for me is easy for anybody. But now I'm beginning to understand that I have a gift. And I love I can teach anybody except the person who comes in and says, I can't do this from the minute they walk in the door. They are very difficult to teach. I teach 3rd grade, 8 years old. They have to be able to follow directions and sit for an hour. And I love teaching students and adults. And because I had difficulty in school, I've learned so much from students. I suggest they twist the reed, and someone will say, no, I see that as an over-under. So the next time I teach, I say, it could be a twist or it could be an over under. So I've learned a great deal by teaching. And I always pay attention to my students. I walk around the room and follow them. The most difficult student, I had a mother and a daughter, and the daughter continued. They were both stone deaf. I don't know if that's a correct term or not, but the fire bell rang one day and they didn't hear it. So, and I didn't realize how much it was very difficult to write. I could explain things much more easily with words. So every lesson I had to write down, and of course in the class I could show them too, which was all right. But that was an experience. So you never know who you're going to get to teach.
Makes you be resourceful as a teacher.
Right. Oh yeah. But it was a challenge. It was a great challenge. And they were very happy. As I said, the daughter continued with the second series of classes. So obviously it meant a great deal to her.
Any favorite teachers that you have had?
No, I have learned from many teachers, and I have a favorite type, a teacher who shows you what they do and then lets you take their knowledge and experiment with it. And I find most of the basket makers are very giving, very sharing. I haven't taken as many weaving classes, but they're not afraid. I mean, they're so good that nobody's going to really compete with them. And I have had classes with teachers who do traditional work where you have to prepare your own materials. They usually have the materials for the basket, but they want you to understand how they have prepared the materials. And we've soaked a log and beaded and stripped it. And that's not my thing, but I was very pleased, John McGuire especially, to have such experts to learn from.
Can you talk about the process of finding one's own creative voice? Because your work, to me, is very true to your creative voice.
Well, one of the things, as I was saying, that I was always told that I wasn't doing things the right way. I was careless. I was sloppy. We didn't have, word correction on our computers. And even writing out my notes, I reread them this morning and I put will instead of whip. I mean, it's just something I have, but nobody knew it in those days. So I used to think when I did my baskets, like one example was I needed an extra spoke, which is the framework of a basket. And I just didn't want to go down in the cellar and get it. So I took a spoke I was using, but was much too long. And I just twisted around and stuck it where I needed it. And the more I wove, the more I thought, oh, this is a whole new shape. This is a whole new idea. So I realized that these little quirks I have of shortcuts and things that I think are silly are part of my creative process, that I'm not afraid to try something or do something. I can't, I've tried sketching out plans. It doesn't work for me because it seems to go wrong. Even if I have a sketch, I start building something up and I see something else out of it. And I've learned, just go with it. That's the way I am. It's the way I work. And
has it taken a while to appreciate that process and that?
Oh, yes. And it's taken most, it's why I had both my children tested at a young age to make, when they were having trouble in school. It wasn't, if you're not a troublemaker, the teachers just ignore you. But I wanted them to have much more confidence in themselves and to know how to deal with things. And I still struggle with it, but that's all right. I'm old enough now. I should be able to do what I want.
Well, seeing the pictures of your work, which we'll go through, it comes across as a very confident voice. Like, this is what I do. And I love seeing that. I'm very inspired by being true to your voice and going where you want to go or where you're being pulled to go with the project. Who and what do you find inspiring?
Well, precision in weaving. I mean, people who, I mean, I'm looking at what you have behind you, which looks like an old quilt, and all the squares are squares. So, I mean, that's another thing I've learned. And this came out in some of the bookmaking. I mean, people laugh when the expression, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. Well, I can't do certain precise things, even though I'd use all the tools that the woman or man sitting next to me uses. So I just don't do that anymore. So, I mean, I would not attempt, except for my own self for fun, is to weave a traditional quilt because it just doesn't work for me. So, but I appreciate that. Shapes and basketry, the use of color, people's creativity. And with old fabrics, the fact that many weaving, a lot of weaving is done on backstrap looms where they can make the most incredible patterns by doing pickup. And understanding that, I recently saw a demonstration of a woman from Peru who was using a backstrap loom, and she was picking up, you know, we could hardly see what she was doing. She was just doing it so fast. And the fantasy, some basket makers are now using tie, those ties they use for closing baskets and arresting people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And using a lot of colorful plastics and metals. So that I think is fun, you know, getting away from the traditional.
Now, had you seen anyone use copper tubing, or that was
no. That may have been, I took a metals class at a conference, North Country Studio Workshops, which is every 2 years in Bennington. And John Garrett did a lot of things with metals, and we all brought our junk and then we shared it. And I may have gone home with some copper tubing after that. But copper tubing comes in a coil. So at first I was sort of cutting it and flattening it out. And then one day I sort of pulled the coil apart, and it sort of sat there on my counter. And I said, well, why don't I just weave a three-dimensional piece? And I did.
What do you think is the most important thing in order to stay passionate about one's creativity?
Don't isolate yourself. During COVID, when none of the guilds were meeting, they really hadn't set up Zooms because we all thought it was going to be 2 months, 3 weeks, not like 3 years. I found Textiles and Tea, which is run by the Handweavers Guild, and every week was an hour lecture, and they have many diverse people who wrapped stones and hung them in a museum in London, and other people who did textiles, and people who did dyeing. That and botanical colors, which is out of California. They had lectures, and then after the lectures, they had the listeners from all over the world share, especially during the real COVID when none of us were going out. And just the connection and just seeing what people were doing and just hearing people and talking about. So now we can go back to conferences and take classes, but you have to be out there. I have to be out there. I would die if I was in isolation. If I went to prison, I could stand it if I could teach the other people, but I could not stand it if I was in solitary confinement.
So how long have you been a member of New York Guild Handweavers?
I think our plans were to sell our house in New Jersey, where we've been for 32 years, and move to New York, rent. And just, my husband had worked in New York, but he had never lived there. I grew up, as I said, near the Metropolitan Museum, way over east. And so I think it's about 3 years. And then of course we had, well, it's been more than 3 years because of COVID. I went to the meetings probably a year before. But I've still been able to get in. You know, it was only an hour from New Jersey. I'm in Connecticut now, so it's 2 hours, but that long. And as I said, it turns out I taught a class once back in 2004, which I'd forgotten about. I gave a lecture, and I think I taught my little mini round reed basket that I do with the school systems that can be done in an hour. It's built off of a styrofoam cup. So the beginning of the basket's always the worst part. So by sticking these, by making the framework accessible and not having to start where everything is loose, makes it made it a very easy class to teach.
That's so much more encouraging than kind of diving into the most difficult part right at the beginning class. Yeah,
the most when people think of baskets, they think of the carry baskets, and those are woven with flat reed, and then a rim is put on at the end. And I always start, when I start a series of classes, to make it easy so people think it's fun, and then when they get to the difficult part, they're willing to put the time in because they've already had fun, and they know they can do it, and they know they can handle the material. But starting with anything, even weaving, is too hard. It
discouraging
work. Yeah, it's very discouraging.
You hook them in with the fun part. That's
right.
That's smart. Well, let's go over your work with these slides. Let's hear about this.
Well, supposedly, I think it was during the 40s, Annie Albers was trying to work with materials that were accessible. And she made a necklace out of washers. And I guess I figured out how to do it by looking at her creation. And then I thought, well, maybe I could use pop tops. So the top one, the one that's more like a circle, is woven both through the top and the bottom of the top pops. And I made a belt like that, and it's very, very flexible. The bottom of one is just woven through the bottom or the top of the pop tops. And that's a little looser. But, again, I since I was teaching with so many, I don't know if young children could do this, but I was always looking for recycling because very many times there is an exhibit and you have to use recycled materials. So I think that's how this started. And the grosgrain ribbon is very durable. And so I've made a lot of these. So, well, this is just part of my stepmother gave me a toaster that was broken. And I said, oh, I can recycle that at our dump. And so, I got rid of it for her, and I'm sitting in the car. I mean, this is the cleanest toaster I'd ever seen. Mine, by the time it needs to go to the dump, you wouldn't want to use it for anything. And so I said, well, I think I could do something with this toaster. So I found there are two books here. I don't know if you have pictures of both of them. Yeah. They're what they call altered books, where you take a book and you rip out the inside, or you don't rip out the inside. And you do something with the pages. So the one that says Your Toast, there are a lot of cartoons that refer to toast. I don't know how I came across them. And the other one has a variety of either toast shapes or toast, like toast to your hostess for the wonderful party, expressions using toast. And one page I highlighted TOAST from all different words and just put circles around it. And they go in the toaster, which I've coiled the, I've coiled the electric cord with I've just wrapped it and did coiling at the end where you stitch into the next thing. And that's actually, I just found out that's going to be a show up on 99th Street at the Barrio Gallery. The New York Textile Study Group is having a show of work up there starting sometime. It's due in May, so I'll get that into our newsletter.
I love this. I love the colors. I love the whole presentation. And that silver, the shine or the reflection of that really works well for
right, as I said, it was like, it seemed like a new toaster, and I don't know, but that's the way my mind goes. I could do something. This toaster just doesn't seem like it's ready for the dump yet.
Oh, it's so creative. I love the books in the bread slots. Oh,
and this was the piece I was talking about. When I opened the coil of copper tubing, it just looked like a shape in itself. And then afterward, I had I made myself stick to a topic of these coiled heads, and I said I'd do so many. And then somebody I showed them to said, I needed something to bring the viewer closer to the head. And that's when I started embellishing the inside. And this is collage. And I think this is called, I have too much going on in my head. So some is sort of pasted to the wall of the basket. The pattern fabric that you use when you're cutting out a dress is very strong. So I put glue on that, and I did the whole inside of the basket. And then I added the collage period pieces, some standing up and some, stuck to the wall of the basket.
I love this. Wow.
This was called Crimson Tide. I drilled through Scrabble letters, and I have some old, it was rummage sales were great. They were called, I think they're called tag sales in Connecticut, but I live just within walking distance of towns, and the churches always used to have great rummage sales. So I got a lot of Scrabble pieces where I could spell words. And this has all like Better Red Than Dead, red sails in the morning, all red sayings where the I think it was the red that you see is banana paper, and that was glued onto the reed. And then I wrote on that, and they're puzzle pieces in this also. And the ends of the copper tubing I hammered down, I made flat. What I wove on was round, because the reed would really weave well if it was flat with the round reed. So the copper tubing is all round, but at the very end, the tips, they're hammered down to make flat, to make them more interesting. And I think I even drilled in and added beads. And I just like shapes, and I also have to touch my work. That's the other thing, so I like texture.
Do you have to soak the rattan?
Oh, yes. But depending on the size or what you're going to do with it, if you're just making a circular basket, you don't have to soak it very long. But this is all wrapped at the edge. When you come to the edge of this shape, you have to wrap it around, and then you come back down, like the edge of, if you're weaving, you get to one edge, you have to turn around and come back. So when you're wrapping around the edge, you have to soak it longer. And then sometimes my rule now is if the reed breaks 3 times and you're working on a very long strand, throw it out, because it's not you, it's not something you've done, it's the material. It can be used maybe for something else, but it can't be used for the very intricate weaving. And, it's a plant, sometimes it may have had a dry season, or it may have just been dried out too long before it was processed. So I've learned very often that it's not always you, it's sometimes material.
Yeah. This is so striking, really beautiful. It's here.
Yeah, this was probably one of the first things I did before the copper tubing. Finding these wonderful driftwood pieces. This is probably a pine, because the pine is a little more flexible. If you just use a regular branch, you can't use anything this long because it snaps. Mm-hmm. And here again, I just started. I probably wasn't weaving it down the way this piece is now developed. I probably was starting with the branch at the bottom and weaving it up. And as I wove, in order to get that twisty shape, you'd weave over 2 or 3 spokes at a time to pull it together. I don't know if I'm describing that, but in order to get a shape, it could have been just flat. I could have just continued to weave it, and that wouldn't have been very interesting. So after I had enough of the just straightforward things, I would pull 2 or 3 of the spokes, the framework, together and weave over those. And then at the very end, I actually sort of gave it a little bit of a twist. And then to make it very small, then you begin to cut out, instead of going over 5 weavers, you'd cut one out and you'd fold it together and make it smaller and smaller, almost like knitting. But knitting, you just knit 2 together. These you actually would have to cut out a piece to make it, to continue that shape. It's interesting because I haven't looked at it for a long time, and it works. Yeah. And then you can see there's a little bit of color differentiation in the reed itself. I don't worry too much about that. I think that adds kind of a pattern. Some is a little darker and some is a little lighter. But I like that because otherwise I think it would be flat.
Yeah.
I think I may have picked that up in Maine when we went, our children went to camp in Maine, and then we stayed on in the same area. So we were there for many summers, and there are always these nice little pine pieces, but this was an exceptional one. So I'm glad I brought it home. One of the things I found that I was making things too big. They wouldn't always start big, but they seemed to grow, and we had a big house, so we could stick them in a corner or on a wall. So when I learned knotless netting, which is a looping process, it's not a net like a fishing net where the loops stay the same. With the net, you couldn't have a knotless netting net to catch a fish because the fish could swim right through it because they're not secured. So I started doing smaller pieces. And these are shells from the Jersey Shore, or parts of shells from the Jersey Shore. And I was using wax linen, which I was already familiar with from basket making and book arts. But then I found some wire, very, very thin wire, which you can find, well, now at craft stores, but in jewelry stores. It's very, very flexible. And I could never remember if the larger number is the smaller gauge or whatever. But I would glue a few shells together and then do the knotless netting over it.
Wow.
And then I could stick, once I had a base, I could stick other things in. And these are just fun. I may have sold a few, but they're just sort of fun, creative things. And then I added some of these techniques to some of the baskets, though I don't know that I sent you any pictures. And one, I did a circular copper tubing, which almost like a coiled piece, and I had a pendant in the middle that was removable. This is another one where the heavy twisted wire, you can't do the knotless netting, but when I was first taught the knotless netting, we did it on grapevine tendrils. So this one kind of mimics a grapevine tendril. And I secured the shell in there and then kept it in with a thinner reed. It's a very flexible technique. I mean, it's fun. You can embellish things on weaving, you know, if you want to put something on a pocket or something. You use a soft material and just embellish something.
Even the colors are all great together. I think that,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the white shell and yeah, the white shell. And the next one is with the grapevine tendril. That is a real grapevine tendril that I was mimicking with the other. And that's good. You have to make sure that it's strong enough if you're going to wear it.
Yeah.
And then with the netting is very frail, and I like the contrast of the frail netting and the sort of stronger grapevine. And I had just a little bead that I was able to, that had a hole in it, so I stuck the wire through that, and
It's a great touch.
yeah. So
yes.
this is the latest thing I've done, and we didn't get to the when are you discouraged or when are you motivated, but I can actually put that in now.
Let's hear.
I work best under pressure, and even we were supposed to have our meeting on Wednesday and we changed it to Friday. Well, Thursday afternoon I started working again. So you know, sometimes if I'm giving extra time, that's not good. But when I have a deadline, and this was made, the Connecticut Weavers Guild, which I'm a member of, was having a show. Wasn't a juried show, it was just a member show. And I hadn't done any basketry in a long time. So I took a shoe last, which I have a collection of, and drilled into it. And I knew I wanted to do a tapestry, but I didn't know how. So I drilled into and made the structure. All the yarn in there that looks like little pieces of either turf or the green part, the bottom, that I just left open. I didn't know exactly how I was going to treat that. And then I wanted to do a tapestry basket, but I just kept weaving and I liked the shape and I liked the reed. So I thought, oh, I'll just do a tapestry sort of at the handle. And so those were the first two, that the tapestry is done on the top part. And one side is kind of sort of Western with the sky, and the other is kind of lush green with a lot of water in it. It doesn't show with the works we've been showing here, but water is very often a theme of my work, like waves or with the shells. I grew up in the Jersey Shore in the summer, so water means a lot to me. But if we can go back now to the final piece, the extra pieces that come down kind of in a little circle, it wasn't until the last day I really decided what to do with those. Those are just pieces. I need to finish the rim off of this, and I didn't know how to do it. And I finally decided I didn't need all the spokes to make a rim. So I just left them in a swirl, and I think it complements. It's kind of a rigid base. Then you have the sort of circular handle, and I think the extra non-woven spokes that just are coming out on the right-hand side kind of complement the top, because otherwise I think it would be too static to have a reed base that was kind of a plain shape, and then the curvy, it needed some more curves. So I did that, and then I had the little tapestry circle. The other side is plain. It doesn't have any tapestry, the side we can't see. And the interesting thing, I've been doing some kumihimo braiding just because it's something I can do in the car. And I took some yarn and did some more. I'm just trying to learn different patterns. And I didn't realize that this shoe doesn't sit flat on the ground like some of the other ones I have. And so I glued it, a kumihimo braid made out of the tapestry yarn, to the base of this, which you can see just a little of, and it stabilized it. So that was fun to bring everything together.
I love to hear that the problems that present, you come up with just really creative solutions for it. Almost kind of those problems help make the piece turn into great piece.
Right. Originally, when I drilled holes to put the spokes in, I drilled them straight through, and I thought that would stabilize it. So in the arch of the foot, and then I was trying to wrap them with the yarn, but the yarn was too fuzzy and it just looked messy. So the komihimo braiding was a much better solution. And it looks nice, and it follows the shoe last. So yeah, that's the other thing that, again, talking about careless, lazy, my poor grammar in high school report cards, that I was willing in this piece to take out things that didn't work and find a better solution, which I wouldn't have done if I'd been working on an essay. I would have just handed it in. So it really depends on what you really care about and what you're enthusiastic about.
Yeah.
So I'm not careless and lazy in the things I really, really like. Well, this was my first shoe, and this was really fun. And I put it in a member show down in Summit, New Jersey, Visual Arts, and I did get a sculptural award. This was when I could find great things at our dump. If you can see, probably a lot of us grew up grinding up leftover pot roast or something with a grinder or coleslaw or something. So that's just the handle of the thing. And the name is Protesting Without a Leg to Stand On. So the concept was that this was an artificial leg, and the grinder was sort of the mechanical thing. And then I ended it with a brown bag, and which has to be repaired. I just found this recently and took it out of the box it was stored in, but the brown paper bag is deteriorating. But that sort of was like you used to see. Here again, it may not be politically correct. Do we call them bums who are on the street? And they can't drink on the street, so they put the paper bag around the beer can. And that was sort of the idea of people deteriorating, and many, unfortunately, Vietnam veterans did end up, on the streets. I have springs in the front, which I found at the dump, some kind of tubing that's coming out on the side. I have a piece of rusty metal, which I came at the dump, which is sort of around where the knee bends. So I just really had fun putting things together. And I think I may have a little, did I send you a detail of that? Yeah, the Vietnam. And the thing that the Vietnam, here again, using my Scrabble letters. And that is, the thing with the holes in it is, I think can't think of it's put on slate roofs to keep the ice from slipping down. It's kind of like a stop. They put them under the slate and in old houses. So, but here again, I found that at the dump, there were 4 of them, and they had holes, and they were that neat shape. So I was able to put it in my leg. And the other thing on the paper at the end, the brown paper, were you know, obituaries. You know, it would say World War I veteran dies at 98 or something. So I cut those out, and they're all pasted on the paper bag at that end of the leg. So it's a tribute and a protest, but it's big. You know, it got a little bit too big.
Very expressive. What I'm getting out of talking to you is kind of go with your instinct, you know?
Right, right. And as I said, I would try to sketch something and it wouldn't work, but I often I think about things sometime and think, how would I do this and what would I do? And then I think that probably, you know, I got the base done, and then I'm thinking about, you know, people who have artificial limbs when they stand up, like they sort of have to click something into place. I mean, this is how, you know, I've seen it in movies and things. And then I would probably go down in the cellar and I would see that crank, and I thought, oh, that's nice. And it has a nice wooden handle on the crank too. So, you know, it's a nice piece. It's not just put in there, but it has a nice shape to it. There's some lettering on it. It also was the era, you know, the 40s, 50s, when people were using these.
But I wanted you to show the necklace the pendant that you're wearing, because I know that's going to catch some attention.
And this is a coiled technique. I've taught this. Coiling takes a long time. So to do a coiled basket, Connecticut always, their meetings are 5 times a year. Connecticut's a big state, so they have local areas that meet every month or however they want to do it, and they meet 5 times a year as a state. And so every state meeting has 3 workshops, but you couldn't get anything done. Like, I couldn't teach a coiled basket in an hour and a half. But I've done this. This is just coiling on wire, and then you can bend it as you want. This is mine, so it's, you can see it's there. I haven't. I still have a little thread there, but that you can. Normally, to make a basket, you'd coil each piece, like the Indian baskets out west, or many of them are coiled. You know, they can hold water, but wow, you know, I took an old idea and just made it fun, and you can just wrap around the wire and just attach it here and here and do something different with it. So that's another thing I've done, is just adapted a technique and used it in a different way.
You addressed a little bit about the being stuck or unmotivated, because you said a deadline helps you. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. And you know, and it's interesting, like some people said, you know, during COVID, oh my gosh, I worked in my studio every day. I got something done. I tried new weaving techniques. I sat down with so-and-so's book, and it doesn't work for me. We ate, of course, we had to eat in. So, you know, we spent a lot of time eating and cooking. Yeah. I made masks. I read a lot. Yeah. You know, again, we thought this was going to be 3 weeks. So, you know, 2 months. Yeah. But I, as I said, I need to be motivated. Now that I've worked on that piece for the Connecticut show, I'm now sort of ready to do something else, but I needed that to get me started. I usually don't get stuck on a project because I usually have a couple things going at one time, too many things. And as approaching my late 70s, I'm really, really trying to decide what, I should spend my time on, because I can't do everything.
I think that's an
and-
important priority for everybody, really.
Right, right. Well, some people are better at it than others, and doing smaller pieces that take less time and less space. Because I once had a class with a teacher, basket teacher, and she told me she doesn't make anything bigger to show that wouldn't fit in this certain packing box, because she has to ship her things. And I mean, that's the thing about the leg. When I put it in this exhibit, I just drove downtown and took it out of my car. But I mean, that's not something that I could really ship very easily. And so you can do very nice small pieces. And that's what I'm working on now, doing something smaller than I can complete.
You mentioned in your bio that you received a certificate in gerontology. I'm so curious about that.
Yes, well, our town of Summit had a very nice program called SAGE. I don't even remember what the acronym was, but they had home health section with for nurses, and also for sort of adult babysitting for people who just couldn't be left alone. They might use the stove or something, but were perfectly fine, and you could go, if you worked for them, you could just visit. It was, like I said, adult babysitting. They had a Meals on Wheels program, and this place was right 2 blocks from where I lived in Summit. So I worked for Meals on Wheels for 6 years in distributing the meals when our volunteer drivers didn't grow up, and working with the kitchen packing. We had 4 areas that we delivered to. So volunteers would go, like, if it was in Manhattan, say from 77th Street to 67th Street and on the east side, and then they'd have another driver for the west side. And so very often you wouldn't be just delivering meals. You'd find someone who was sick when you arrived, or you'd find someone who was on the floor when you arrived. So there was a lot more. I didn't do the assessments at the beginning because that wasn't my job. But just delivering meals was usually just part of the situation. Most of the people didn't either have children or didn't have relatives close by. So that's why they needed our help. And Union County College had a program for gerontology, which included, oh my gosh, it included nutrition and wellness. What would you do, in a nursing home, what family needed to know. It was a while back, so I don't remember all the courses, but I took 1 course a semester and did well in it. And I thought maybe it would become more of a career, but then I stopped working there because I got a chance to go to Newark and do the artist in residency, and they wouldn't give me a 4-week leave of absence. So I said goodbye.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's become helpful. Everybody in their own life has aging parents, so it was useful for that.
Sure. What does being part of a guild mean to you?
I think it's the communication, the chance to meet with other people who have their resources, sharing resources, with our lectures, meeting new people, like we've had someone who does lace and someone who does just general weaving, the flax program. It makes you think. And then seeing our show and tell with the newsletter, we get great resources, and having as more and more people come back to the meetings, it's just communications. It's being with like-minded people who understand you and can say, oh, that's not a weird basket, that's an interesting basket, or That's an interesting way of weaving. I never would have done it that way.
And what would you say to people starting out in fiber art?
I would say do what makes you happy, because if it does make you happy, it's a job. I mean, some people really like their jobs, but I found that out when I was doing commission work, you know, or when people say, oh, will you make me 3 Easter baskets? It wasn't fun. You know, it was always nice to get some money, but it's not really what I like to do. Experiment. Take classes from many different teachers as you can, different styles. If you think you're traditional, then take a class with someone who does something contemporary. Go to conferences. Just expose yourself to as much as possible. And there's small conferences. We have in New England, we have the New England Weavers Guild that's going to meet this summer, and also the MAFA, the Mid-Atlantic. And these are small, you know, it does take money, but it doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, you can just go for a long weekend and but get out there and see what people are doing. And people come from all over. And, you know, you might meet somebody from Ohio or somebody who has different resources than you do. So just try different things. Don't be afraid to try. You know, you never have, I've taken classes, I say, I'll never do that again. But I'm glad I went. The thing I've been most passionate about is going up to Bennington every 2 years to this North Country Studio Workshop. The college Bennington is closed in January, and we stay in the dorms and use their facility, which is all the classes are held in one building. And there's usually a fiber, jewelry making, pottery. You can visit all the classes in the evening. You get to hear lectures by all the teachers, and the classes are only about 12 people in a class. And just being there, you know, not even just seeing what the teachers have made, what the other students, they bring their slides. It's great. And I've taken like bookmaking and felting and indigo dyeing. You don't have to take it in your own field. You know, obviously I can't do the pottery or the jewelry because I don't know all the techniques, but most of the classes, people switch around all the time, and very inspiring.
And what's ahead for you in your work?
Staying small, not getting carried away with big things. And I want to try more of the tapestry, weaving on the baskets. I kind of like that. And I think I could even work in like jewelry pieces or something. Cool. But
well, thanks, Elisa. This has been so great and inspiring.
Well, it's been fun visiting with you. And, you know, to pull things together, sometimes, you know, you don't even remember. As I said, I look myself up on the internet to remember some of the things I'd done. So it was sort of reassuring for me, and
a lot to be proud of.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll see you at the next meeting. And thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and share, and subscribe to the New York Guild of Handweavers YouTube channel. If you're interested in joining the New York Guild of Handweavers, please go to nyhandweavers.org. See you in the next video, and until then, happy weaving.